Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Lake and Connors Power Hour.
Yep.
As you know, it's been a rotating cast of hosts ever since Joe turned out to be an unsavory character.
A supervillain of
A
sorts.
supervillain of sorts.
Yeah.
Ever since that point, we've been rotating hosts. But you know what? The Power Hour is going strong. You can't stop the crazy train.
No, you can't.
So this is episode 8.
Yeah.
Where we're going to talk about all sorts of shit. But, you know, we always start in the basis in pop culture.
Hell yeah.
And Lake was wondering about James Bond movies.
Yeah, I heard that you watched through all of the James Bond movies recently, and I've only really seen the Daniel Craig movies. I don't even think I've seen any of the any of the classic ones.
Recently is a stretch. It was like 2021. It was my COVID project.
Oh.
I feel like a lot of people had the COVID project where they're like, I'm going to watch through all of blank series.
Yeah.
And then you do it and drink a lot, and then all of a sudden you come out the other end as a bigger alcoholic than before.
Yeah.
You already had kind of a drinking problem. Like,
that's pretty much
legally you had a drinking problem, but now you really do.
Yeah,
you know?
you weren't at the Ogden house for the 2020 period, right? That was after.
No.
Yeah, we were already drinking, but then it became just drinking and playing like dice games and like Catan.
Oh, it was like a solid 4 times a week when I was at Ogden.
Oh yeah, no, it became an every night thing. What's they call it? Vegas bombs, Red Bull, and Crown Royal became a ritual, and dice games, and yeah, it was.
When
great.
did you leave the Ogden house? Because one day I just came back to Superior and it was abandoned.
Yeah, well, because after...
Not abandoned. I'm sure the house has to be fucking condemned by now.
When I left it, I gave it to a co-worker we worked with, Keith. You remember Keith?
Wasn't Keith with you there for a while? Because I thought I visited, or he was like crashing on a couch or something.
Yes.
Because I visited one time and Keith was on the couch.
Yeah, Keith's a goofy motherfucker that I worked with at the pizza place in Superior.
Keith's the one whose mom gave a hand job to a fucking homeless dude.
And for some reason, he loved to talk about that story.
It's a classic story.
He's like, "Oh, have you heard about the time that
my mom gave a hand job to him?"
Yeah, because after you guys left, I replaced you with just some friends of mine. Including Keith. And then once I left, which was, when was that? Because I was there 2020, so it must have been 2021 later. And then Keith actually had, like, his whole family move in there after we left.
What?
Yeah, dude, I came back and it was, like, filled with just all of the Graves family. And I was like, what the fuck's going on here?
So that lease just got passed from me, Joey, and Aiden to me. You and Parker being kind of... You guys inherited the house from us. You and Parker lived in the basement.
Yeah, we started in the basement.
Joey moved out.
Yeah.
And then you guys came upstairs.
Yeah, I got to
Then I moved out and Sam moved in.
Yep. And
then Aiden moved out and Keith moved in. And then you and Sam moved out at that point? And that's when Keith took over?
No, because they were all there, and then who was it? I think everybody left because I said that I was going to move and shit hit the fan, basically, because one of the people, I'm not going to name who, basically just stopped paying rent for like 2 or 3 months. And I decided, I told him, I was like, basically, if you don't pay me, I'm just going to take all of your shit, more or less. I was like, I'm going to take the equivalent of the money that you have in the shit that you have in your place. And I set all of his shit, I took all, because it was your previous room. So I apparently had a bunch of your shit, because I had those, I have still to give you those. I have those paintings that you have.
Right.
What are those paintings?
Do you know what happened to my gold Darth Vader bust?
No.
That's gone with the wind. I forgot that shit in Superior. This is my dead uncle's 1 in 250 bronze Darth Vader bust I forgot in Superior.
What the fuck, dude?
My deceased uncle's Darth Vader bust that I somehow inherited. I didn't even think he was a Star Wars fan, but my dad's just like, I found this in his house, buddy. You might want it.
Yeah, once you have a bust of Darth Vader, you're a Star Wars fan.
Never talked about Star Wars, but he had a limited 1 in 250 Darth Vader mini bust.
Maybe he wasn't a fan, it was just like his religion. He just like would go home after work and worship the
just believed in it like in Scientology.
Yeah, he's like,
Scientology for even dumber
people. Yeah, one day the Emperor will come and save us, unite us. Yeah, because, what was it? Yeah, this nameless person took all their shit and pushed it in front of the doorway to the house. And he came back one day, and I just gave him I was like, here's your stuff. I'm going to take this shit if you don't pay me right now. And he didn't.
All I know is somehow we left with our me and Aiden left with our security deposit, and it just...
which is a miracle.
Did you guys have to pay a security deposit, or I don't know what
I
happened.
don't think we got money
because
back.
before you guys came in, because that was kind of a crack house, and it kind of got
worse.
it was just inherited by person to person, just kept getting passed. I wonder if it's still in the lineage, or if anybody actually went to a realtor for it since.
I wonder.
When's the last time someone's rented that house on a realtor? Do you think it was 2017 when I took it?
I think my name was on it. Because I would still go there.
No, yeah, because you took over when I left.
Yeah.
I think Joey was there like a month after I left.
And then we replaced him with Matt. I just remembered this the other day.
Matt lived there, right?
I had like no memory of that. Because I just remember, because he got us into a D&D group, me and Sam at one point. But in my memory, I had no idea how me and Sam got into a D&D group. Because I was like, I have no fucking memory of who. And it was Matt, a guy I barely knew, invited us to his D&D group and then left the D&D group. So in my memory, I was like, I have no idea how we got, because it was just a bunch of random fuckers.
So you were just still in the D&D group?
Yeah, me and Sam did it. Even though Sam kind of, I think he enjoyed it, but he didn't really understand the concept of a dungeon master. He kind of thought it was just a dude with a god complex, you know what I mean?
That's what it is.
Well, to a certain degree.
If you play D&D, that's 90% of dungeon masters are just like, dicks. They decide if you live or die. Unless you get a nat 20, then whatever the fuck you say happens.
Yeah, more or less. They have to find a way to weave it in. You're like, oh, you got drunk at the bar and fucked Oprah Winfrey. Okay, I guess we can make that work somehow. Yeah.
Okay, so you leave the battle arena, you went to the bar and fucked Oprah Winfrey.
Yeah.
And that's what I couldn't stand about D&D. Especially because, see, when I left, I worked at a restaurant for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm.
And then I started working at AMC, and that's when shit hit the fan, because shit was just weird there. Like, I got in a D&D group too, actually.
Oh, yeah.
And it ended up going real poorly because, so, I know a lot of Corys. I dated a girl named Corey. The first person I smoked weed with was named Corey.
Dude, you know, I haven't dated a single girl that didn't have a dude name.
It's not surprising.
You dated a girl with a dude name too, Corey?
Yeah.
Dude, what is...
Well, her name was Corinne, but she, just Corey.
So
it wasn't like Corey. Her name was Corinne, but she went by Corey.
Why?
I don't fucking know.
Oh, man. Is that not a red flag
why?
immediately?
I don't care.
I guess it doesn't matter, but it just seems a little bit strange.
But,
I don't care either, but it's just why... Corinne's not like a bad name or anything.
I think it was just like short, like a pet name the parents gave her, and it just stuck.
They just really wanted a boy, and they're just like, well, just
no, they already had a boy, but they did have 4 daughters too.
They wanted more boys. And they're like, okay,
well, the boy didn't come till after her. So,
well, there you go.
Anyways,
that's what it was.
I don't remember what I was.
You were talking about your D&D group.
Oh yeah. So I know a lot of Corys, so I have to, talk about them in separate. There's Corey that kind of looked like a horse. Corey from South Sudan, Africa.
Okay, all right.
Corey Mac's girlfriend, and Fat Corey, the dungeon master.
Wow.
And Fat Corey had a dungeon complex, or had a god complex.
Right, so he was the dungeon master.
And the D&D group was weird because he was really ass hurt, because some people took it really seriously. Like, his best friend took it mad serious, along with, like, one of his other D&D diehard friends. And everybody else took it like fucking assholes. And I was kind of somewhere in the middle. I was the chaotic neutral.
Yeah, that's usually where I am, too. I'm like, I'll fuck around.
Whereas, like, if somebody fucks around and it's like, I'm banging Oprah Winfrey, bro.
Yeah, you'll be like...
Like, I'll be like, I'll take the mouth. But, but if we're playing serious, I can play serious.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, anyways, he was a manager at AMC, and we started getting in a feud because he wanted to be the GM of my location, but to do that, they would have had kicked me out of my location. And I said, fuck nah. And then my boss was like, why? And I said, well, maybe if his lazy ass got off Skyrim for 1 or 2 minutes and actually decided to work, I'd be more accepting of him taking my role. Taking my place. So, and that was on an email chain with like 10 people.
Oh, jeez.
And I said if his lazy ass got off Skyrim, it wasn't very smart. I got in trouble for that. So there was some tension in the D&D group after that. But then the D&D group really collapsed when he got ripped and cheated on his wife because of me not letting him take over the Arbor position, because Arbor was such a ghetto theater that I basically had to leave as a normal manager so he could become GM. And we just didn't have a GM and they didn't want to promote me, so I stuck around. He didn't get the GM role because I told him fuck off. And AMC's like, yeah, if we don't have to pay a GM and just keep paying this guy $15 an hour, we're happy with it.
Yeah, well, if someone's willing to take less pay, they're going to be like,
that
guy's
hired. If someone's willing to take less pay for more money. So he got a little butthurt about it. And then he left to go to Planet Fitness because of me. And then he got mad ripped. Like, he went from fat Corey to ripped Corey somehow. Because he was just deadlifting.
For some reason, I thought you meant he smoked a lot of weed and then...
No, I mean ripped Corey as in he was lifting weights and shit.
Oh, okay. Oh,
and he got ripped.
Went full.
And then... yeah.
Uh-oh.
So he got ripped, and then he cheated on his wife.
Oh, well. The power
and he kind of used, like, the you have diabetes thing. But, like, Corey has diabetes, too, but now he was ripped with diabetes.
Which is cooler.
Exactly. So the whole D&D group imploded because people were taking sides. I didn't care, so I just stopped reading the Discord messages.
Yeah.
So that's how I felt. That's how my COVID D&D group fell apart, is because Corey cheated on his wife because he got ripped because I refused to let him take my job.
I don't know how ours didn't fall apart faster, because we'd show up at a local game shop in Superior and do it in one of their rooms there, and Sam would always bring in a bunch of, like, what's the sparkling water, booze shit, the fucking everybody drinks,
White Claws?
White Claws. He'd bring, like, White Claws in his bag and wouldn't tell anybody, and then he'd just, like, look over and be like, oh, it's your move, Sam, and he takes a White Claw out of his bag and chugs it, and he's just getting smashed while we're playing because he'd have a great time doing D&D if he was smashed.
Jesus.
So I kind of figured that would, end it for us. But no, it wasn't until, like, they had to switch locations and go to some dude's house in his basement, and we just kind of just stopped showing up. Like, they would have let us keep going, which is a miracle, because Sam was fighting battles with the Dungeon Master the whole time and trying to understand what his problem was, even though the Dungeon Master was just doing his role in the group.
Well, I've been hard avoiding rejoining, because you can see I got a character sheet my friend made me. And I've been trying hard to not.
Really, it is fun. You need the right group. Mostly, you need a good dungeon master.
I don't think it's the right dynamic, man.
Yeah, you need a dungeon master that everybody's cool with and will.
I'm not feeling the dynamic, and then one of our like 2 weeks into it happening, it kept getting pushed off. Once it was because of me, and it was like 3 or 4 weeks in. Mm-hmm. I canceled once, and like 3 other people kept canceling, and then one guy had to cancel permanently because he got arrested for choking out a 14-year-old. And this is a group of like 40-year-olds, and then me.
And this isn't Joe.
No, this is unrelated to Joe.
You gotta stop hanging out with pedos, man.
I can't hang out with people from the theater. I don't think it was sexually motivated that he choked out a 14-year-old. I think he got in a feud with a 14-year-old and tried to choke the bastard out.
Much more understandable, honestly.
And it was rationalized by the person who tried to pull me into the group by saying, well, he was blackout drunk. I'm like, well...
Classic. Everyone loves to blame everything.
If you're so blackout drunk that you're choking out 14-year-olds...
It's still a problem.
It's still a problem. If you're like 40 and you're blackout drunk, you probably got a problem. Yeah, maybe the occasional... But how do you get blackout drunk around 14-year-olds when you're 40, and then get so mad at said 14-year-old that you choke him out? It's he deserves the jail time. I'll put it that way.
Things don't add up to anything positive.
There's no way to rationalize it.
No, I don't understand that.
So I've quit. I'm never playing D&D. I'm never trying D&D again. It's a bad omen for me, bro.
That's too bad. I recommend D&D for some people. There's that Baldur's Gate 3 game that came out, which is supposed to be like video game form of D&D as best as they could do it. But I heard they like took out the higher level shit, because once you get higher level, basically all it does is add spells that just completely break the game. Like you can warp reality and shit, and they're like, well, we're not gonna be able to fucking program that, obviously.
No. Yeah.
But I have some buddies that got that game, and it looks solid. I like it. I always just like the concept, and I like hanging out with people, and I like both getting into the character and trolling and seeing what you can get away with.
Oh, exactly.
Both are very fun. And, fuck, do it. I don't know. It's fun. Try it out, people. It's not so bad.
If I can find the right group, man, I'll do it.
It's for sure. Don't go in and do it with a bunch of fucking randos at the game shop that you don't know. It's gonna be weird. You know, you gotta have the right group. But yeah, I don't know. It's not that bad. But I want to circle back to the Ogden house because after I took that dude's stuff and decided that I was gonna move out, we had a guy who had moved in during COVID because he just slept on our couch during COVID.
Who was this?
It's a guy named Tony who was like 40-year-old
Oh,
dude.
is that the dude who got all the girls who had like 10 kids or whatever?
I don't think so. If he did, I don't remember that. But I just know that like either he had just gotten kicked out of his house or something had happened and he didn't have anywhere to go during COVID, so he was just in our house because he had to stay in somewhere and just got kicked out of his house. So he was there, and he was a hoot, drinking and playing games. Anyways, we had a great time, but our lives became going to work, coming back, drinking tequila, and playing dice games. So when I told him that I wanted to move out, he was pretty upset with me, because that was basically our entire life, was just drinking and playing dice games. And I felt pretty bad, but I was just stuck there, you know? I had to do something different, and that whole house fell apart. Thankfully, Keith seemed to... His family wanted to move in there, and it worked out. And then I moved back to Bemidji and then to Fargo, and still ended up delivering pizzas like I did in Superior. Not much ended up changing.
Hey, you know what? The Ogden house is bad omens. I am kind of amazed that the lineage, the one lease, kept getting passed, though, to the point that I didn't even really know what the story was on the Ogden house.
It was a real, anymore. Started from the bottom. And then got to the top for me.
It was kind of the reverse. Oh, for you, yeah.
Because I was living in the fucking basement when I first
You lived on the couch. You lived on the basement.
Mm-hmm. I think I
made your way upstairs.
I upgraded from the basement to the couch at one point. Yeah, that was an upgrade. And then I got my own room.
Well, Parker was a couch hog, but when Parker left, I think that's kind of how you got the couch.
Yep, pretty much.
Jesus, and then there's. Whatever happened with Little Dopehead and Pac-Man? Did they just stop coming around when... Last
I knew, Dopehead was running from the law and getting attacked by random heroin addicts and shit. Or no, meth addicts. That makes more sense. Yeah. And he had some little Native American girl that he was hanging out with. And then he was at our house one time, and I had just went to... Because I had a bad habit, I still kind of do, of... Because I get a bunch of cash tips, and I'll just have cash fucking all over the place in my room, right? So and he's a little fucking thief, so he's noticed. He took notice to that. But I just went to the bank and deposited all the 20s and 10s that I left lying around my room because I was like, that's a lot of fucking money. I should probably bring that to bank.
Right.
That day or that night, robs all the cash in my room, but joke's on him. Even though it was probably hundreds of bills, it was all like 1s and 5s. He maybe got $200 from it, and I just never talked to him again. I was like, well, you fucking robbed me. What do you expect? Like, he wanted forgiveness. It's like, dude, you just straight up robbed me after we were friends for like 2 years. Like,
yeah,
I don't know how you think this is going to go
Lil
down.
Lil Dopehead was a character.
Yeah, we called him Lil Dopehead because he was like a 14-year-old that they bought acid off of or some shit. And so they just gave him the worst nickname they could think of because he was obviously a little degenerate.
Yeah, there's Pac-Man. I think Pac-Man stopped coming around before I even left.
No, well, Pac-Man also fucked me over. I befriend terrible people sometimes, don't I?
Yeah, I was going to say, Pac-Man got you kicked out of the one house, which is how you ended up in the Ogden house.
Yeah, because I lived in a house that I got right before going to college, and it was chill, but then my brother moved in, it was fine, but then Pac-Man moved in, and then one day he brought his dog into the house without saying anything, and then the dog shit all over the basement. And he never did anything about it. And I'm the kind of person where it's like, if the mess isn't mine, I'm not dealing with it.
Fucking Joey's dog was doing the same shit.
Right. Yeah.
And you never mentioned it. No. So I go downstairs one day for the first time in years. Because we used to play Tron down there. And I'm like, what the fuck? Because it was flooded up to my ankles. And I'm like, Jesus Christ. And then I go down there and there's just dog shit floating, bro. I'm like, oh my god, dude.
And I'm like, yeah, this is where I sleep.
And you're like on your bed sleeping. It's like 3 in the afternoon. And I'm like, poor fucking. What the fuck?
I was content, man.
The first time you went there, your first impression of the house was when Wolfie was building the coffin.
Yeah, you guys, I I always thought you were cool because we both worked at Target.
We did. I worked at the cafe as a shit boy, and you worked as the shit boy cart pusher.
I was the cart pusher. We
were the fucking whipping boys at Target.
We were the cart people, especially because if nobody knows, or at Target they don't have janitors during the day. They just get whoever the fuck is willing to do it to do the janitor work, which tends to be the cart pushers. So I've cleaned shit, vomit, and blood off the floor within 2 feet of each other multiple times. And I've had friends that were cart pushers that cleaned shit off the walls. So, yeah, we were definitely the whipping boys there. And I would just go over to you because you worked at the food...
I worked at the little food cafe.
Yeah, the food cafe. And we just bullshit about, like, video games.
Yeah, it was... I don't know how it came up, but you were like... You came back there and we started talking about Mega Man 5 for, like, an hour.
Yeah, because I was probably actively playing the game.
You were actively playing a lot of Mega Man at that time.
I fucking love Mega Man, dude. It's just one of the first games where I realized I love old games, and I love games that are hard and piss me off. I don't know what's wrong with me, but Mega Man definitely fits in that
Mega Man fits both bills.
Yeah, and so we'd bullshit, and you kept bringing up... I'd keep bringing up games, and you'd be like, yeah, I got that. And it reached the point where I'm like, bullshit, basically. I was like, there's no fucking way.
So I called you over to the house to show you the game collection.
Yeah, because I was like, there's no way you guys have all of this. And then I finally go to your place, and there's fucking stacks of games, lined, of every fucking console that's ever existed.
Yeah, most of our shit's at our dad's house right now, but we got the Nintendo games
most
here.
Most of your shit's at your dad's house? You still have like 400 games here, bro.
This is just the Nintendo games, bro. We have more Xbox and PlayStation games than Nintendo, probably.
You definitely have the largest video game collection and movie collection that I've seen, which is pretty crazy.
We got a fucking lot. That's why Aiden makes his game videos. I make my movie videos. We do it up.
It's fucking sick, and I thought that was cool. And my entire memory was going to your guys' place, playing Smash Bros, kicking your guys' ass. Maybe that was the second time. And then you guys kept making the same reference to Star Wars. Do a bear, or what is it? That's a neat trick, or whatever.
That's a cool trick.
Yeah, you guys kept saying that bit over and over, and then I hear sounds from downstairs, and it's your buddy making a fucking coffin.
Oh yeah, because that was the first time you came over.
Yeah.
Because you're like, what the fuck is that noise downstairs? I'm like, oh, Wolfie's been here like 3 days, and you're like, who the fuck's Wolfie?
Yeah.
And then we go downstairs and there's Wolfie just making a coffin. Although I will say, Wolfie's father passed away. And Wolfie actually is on this channel. If you look up Wolfie's Beer Corner, it's one of our earliest video series. But his dad passed away and then he became kind of an eccentric. And he started MMA fighting.
No way.
Yeah, and he got ripped in Taiwan.
In Taiwan. He moved
to Taiwan, and he bought a bunch of packs of smokes. So I was hanging out with Micah, who's another Superior guy. Well, he was from Forest Lake, but he moved up to Superior with us.
Yeah, familiar name.
And he met Matt in college, which is how Matt ended up moving in with you guys.
Wow, okay.
But he gave us some cigarettes. We were trying Taiwan cigarettes, and on the front of the package they're very strict. They have, like, rotted lungs on the front of the packages.
Same thing in Mexico. When we went to Cancun, it was like, oh, $3 cigarettes, awesome. Why is they so cheap? And then you see actively dying person on the back of the box, and I'm like, yeah, that'd probably keep me from buying them, too,
It's like, you're actually gonna fucking die.
Yeah.
Which is kind of smart.
It makes sense.
Because here, like, a cigarette... we're still against cigarettes in America as, like, a first world country. But these third world countries got to figure it out. How to make it so you're like, well, I look at this box and I don't really want to smoke these cigarettes.
No, they do it right. But like here it's like the media, we talk about it, we say you shouldn't do it, but when you go and buy it, ain't nobody gonna stop you, and they're gonna tell you what everything is, and you're gonna get out of there just fine, and it's not gonna show a dead person on the back.
Yeah.
So we could probably step up our game on the anti-nicotine product things. Instead, we're selling vapes that are like. Juicy flavor, they taste like candy, and it's like, oh, that's definitely not marketed at the kids or anything.
Yeah, I don't know if Taiwan would sell me a multicolored vape called Cowabunga Luminaire. But that's what I'm smoking while I'm making this video.
Oh my god, yeah, the vapes are really scary with the flavors, but I keep getting them anyway.
Yeah, no, the vapes are... you know.
The power of addiction. That's incredible.
Yeah, that's what 10 years of vaping will do to a motherfucker.
Oh, yeah.
'Cause 10 years. 'Cause I started vaping when I was 15.
Oh, jeez. Well, that's where they're targeting them. They don't care about the legal age.
100% targeting 15-year-olds who are
just
like in the basement. One of your friends pull that shit out.
Mm-hmm.
Although 10 years ago they looked like little wands, like Harry Potter. So I just wanted to hit the magic nicotine wand. Mm-hmm. And then the first time the first time I smoked a cigarette, I was like 13 with Corey the horse. Because I had to mention all the Corys in this video. His dad used to hand roll his cigarettes, mm-hmm. and we stole one cigarette off the table and ran like deep in the woods because we were super scared we'd get caught.
Oh yeah.
And he smoked like fucking blacks that he hand rolled, no filter blacks.
Oh Jesus.
So I take a puff off of it. I'm like coughing like crazy. Then Corey takes a puff out of it, and he's coughing like crazy. And we both just start yakking in the woods, and we're like, "That's cool. We just smoked a cigarette."
Like it was the coolest.
And we were like nicotine high for like an hour because it's like
primarily just made you sick, and you're like, "That was so cool."
100% rat poison, 10% nicotine.
Yeah, jeez.
You know, that fucking cigarette was 110%, bro.
Well, fucking the movies make them look so cool. There's actually a movie that I blame entirely on my nicotine. One character specifically I blame on my nicotine addiction. Gandalf from Lord of the Rings.
Gandalf was blowing fucking O's, bro.
Yeah, he was. He was blowing like magical creatures with his smoke. And it was like, wow, smoking's so cool. Because the first time I smoked, it was a pipe. And like, honestly, it was a pretty innocent way to start because it was just like, and I tried to do it the right way, you know, don't inhale, you know, it's just for the taste, but you still get some of that shit in you, and then all of a sudden it's like, hey buddy, who had the pipe? You got more of that nicotine, could we smoke pipe again? And then it was cigars, and then cigarettes, and then anything.
Well then as my teenage years went on, we found new and creative ways to smoke, like when my friend Olaf made a hookah out of a vodka bottle.
Dude, I want to go to one of those hookah bars, actually, to be honest.
Come out to Renaissance Fair in like a month. Come back out. We'll go to the Renaissance Fair. It's like 10 minutes away from my place.
Ooh.
Yeah, bro. And they got a hookah bar there.
I could live my dream. I'll dress up like Gandalf.
Yes, dude! Literally!
Get a wizard hat.
You're gonna dress up like Gandalf.
Oh.
It's not only acceptable, but it's encouraged to dress up like Gandalf.
Oh, for sure.
And then you go to the hookah bar and you're blowing magical creatures, bro.
Yo, dude! Don't get me excited, dude. Oh, I will do that.
While you're drinking mead with a bunch of dwarfs.
Oh my god, dude.
It's perfect, bro.
I want it so bad. Speaking of movies, though, maybe we mentioned it already. I do want to know your tier list for James Bond, because I need to know what to watch. Because I've only seen the Daniel Craig movies. And I know that there's like fucking 40 or something. And there's all kinds of references to them that I don't know.
Right.
So, like, fucking, the closest I can get to understanding 007 is fucking when they reference GoldenEye in the 64. Like, I'm too...
Should I just rank every James Bond movie right now?
You should go by era. Because I tend to be cool with older movies, but I could see me not enjoying some if the references, you know, I don't fucking understand what they're talking about. They're speaking, you know, backwards English.
I'll give you the breakdown.
All right.
I'll give you the real quick breakdown of the movies.
All right. Hit me.
All right. We'll start with the Eon. Well, should we start official or unofficial? Should I just get the unofficial out of the way, or is that a special treat for the end?
Special treat for the end, probably. I'd go back to the beginning. Like, what even is the first?
Okay, Dr. No
is the first one.
Okay, we'll talk about the Sean Connery movies first.
Sure.
So you got Dr. No, and Dr. No is kind of the archetype for James Bond.
Like, it hits all the stereotypes.
Like, it hits the stereotype, but it created the stereotypes.
Right. So it wasn't even like
in
it
a
was
lot
original.
of ways, because the books are different. But the James Bond archetype is kind of there. But to be honest with you, kind of skippable.
Really?
From Russia with Love is the first one where James Bond gets its footing. It kind of feels like North by Northwest, if you've ever seen that Hitchcock movie.
Oh, I'm actually not familiar.
You ever see the Family Guy skit where Peter is running from the gyroplane in the cornfields?
No.
Oh.
I'm not.
That was just a really famous,
Yeah.
shitty...
I like how you can easily try to
meme.
reference like classic movies by being like, oh, you know the Family Guy bit where they make
I'll try to tell you about classical movies via cultural osmosis you might have seen at some point.
Okay, so what was the name of that one? That's
From Russia with Love.
From Russia with
So
Love.
that's the second one.
I'm writing these down actually, because legit, I need to watch some of these.
Yeah. Get your list ready.
Mm-hmm.
Dr. No starts the archetype, but it's a little slow and skippable. You can forget that one. From Russia with Love is a really good movie.
Okay, cool, sick. And that's Sean Connery still.
Yeah, so we'll go through the Sean Connery. So so how it goes is the first 6 are Sean Connery.
Okay.
And then it's George Lazenby, and then it goes back to Sean Connery. But I'll explain this later. Goldfinger, that's a classic. You gotta watch it. Bond gets a little less, a little wackier in this one, but not too wacky. It still takes itself seriously. Thunderball, it's a skipper.
Really? Because I have heard of that one. It's just not very good, or is it just
here's
weird?
the thing. There's a lot of underwater segments, and it sounds cool in theory.
But it's also
him
year?
scubaing around,
Yeah,
kind of grinds everything to a halt.
Well, and what year was this?
65.
Yeah, you're not gonna do any kind of underwater sequence that's really all that intriguing.
You only live twice. James Bond's in yellowface half the time.
So I want to watch this one.
It's wacky
because of that.
It is. It's not terrible.
Really?
But you gotta keep in mind you're gonna see a little Mickey Rooney yellowface.
I'm gonna put "You Only Live Twice" with a star by it, and I'll know what it means.
On Her Majesty's Secret Service. So Sean Connery leaves the franchise. He says, "I'm never coming back as Bond. Fuck off."
Uh-huh.
And then George Lazenby takes over. This is probably my 3rd favorite Bond movie.
Oh, really?
It's genuinely really solid. James Bond gets married, and his wife gets killed by his arch nemesis Blofeld.
Spoiler, but it's fine.
Well, I'm drunk, so the spoilers are coming in.
It's fine.
For every James Bond movie.
It's a fucking 60-year-old movie. I should probably know. What's that one called?
On Her Majesty's Secret Service.
Okay.
That one's good. I'm just giving you the highlights so you can watch the good ones.
I don't want 15 movies. I want 7 or 8. So On Your Majesty's Secret Service. Okay.
You're probably gonna wind up with 10.
Okay, that's fine. All right, from there, and that actor, how many movies did they have? Just
he did one.
And then
he
did one, and it was great.
And then
we're done with you.
No, the 60s were up, and he's the James Bond is so 60s, and there's a great documentary where he talks about his one movie tenure as Bond, and he's basically well, I was a hippie, and they said that James Bond couldn't have a beard, and I liked having a beard, and they said James Bond was the fad of the 60s and was going to go out in the 70s.
They convinced him that he shouldn't do Bond anymore?
Not Eon. He convinced himself, and so did his agents and shit.
Right. I was going to say his agent.
So then they did Diamonds Are Forever, and they're like, who the fuck can we get for this? And then Sean Connery's like, well, if you pay me a lot of money, I'll come back. So Sean Connery from the originals come back. Diamonds Are Forever is not a good movie, but my mom lives in Vegas, so I'm very intimately familiar with the area. And there's a lot of Vegas references where you're like, oh, it's the Golden Nugget in 1971. That's sick.
Oh, okay.
So it's kind of Bond takes America, more specifically Southwestern America, specifically Nevada, specifically Las Vegas, the old strip, Fremont Street.
Okay.
So, he's dicking around on Fremont Street.
So cool if you're interested in the history of Las Vegas and otherwise skippable.
Skip it unless you're intimately familiar with Las Vegas.
Okay, gotcha.
And you want to see it. Because James Bond visits all these cool and exotic places.
Okay, sure.
Live and Let Die. This is when Roger Moore takes over. And Roger Moore was kind of taking Bond into a sillier direction. they became a little campy, or they became more campy. Not that Sean Connery didn't have its campy moments and over-the-top moments, but this is where it was kind of winking and nudging at you.
Yeah.
And each one kind of has its own flair. Live and Let Die, for example, was kind of a blaxploitation movie. You had, like, voodoo and that kind of thing.
Okay, yeah.
I like Roger Moore in the lot. I like Roger Moore. Not really one that you have to watch.
I played the song from that movie when I was in.
Because Paul McCartney made that song with the Wings.
Live
and Let Die.
Yeah, it's a great song.
Live and Let, and then Guns N' Roses covered it.
And yeah. That was
The Man with the Golden Gun is an interesting movie. It's a little over the top and campy. The dwarf in it, or the little person, turned out to be like a sex pervert and a drug addict.
Oh.
And he was like making women have sex with him when he got
bastard.
famous. A little bastard.
Little bastard.
That's what I'm saying.
He thought he could get away with this.
Interestingly, the villain is Christopher Lee, and Christopher Lee's great. He plays like...
oh, yeah. Fucking hugely famous.
He played Dracula a lot.
Yeah, horror.
Count Dooku in Star Wars later in life. He was in Lord of the Rings as Saruman.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah, that's where I know him from Star Wars and shit. But he was big in the old horror movies, right? Like,
yeah, in like the 50s. And then in the 50s, 60s, 70s, he played Dracula a lot. He had some kind of bit parts. The interesting thing is, he was first cousins with Ian Fleming, who created James Bond.
Oh, wow.
And then somewhat unrelated to that, because Ian Fleming wasn't super involved with... I mean, he'd show up to the movies, but... Kind of unrelated to that, supposedly he got the job, but he's first cousins with the guy who created.
He was a massive actor already at that point, so they probably would have wanted him.
He was just a big actor. They wanted him for this villain role. He really worked in the role, but it happened to be created by his cousin.
So these more movies, are any of those, should I put them on the list?
I was about to give you one. The Spy Who Loves Me is like probably the quintessential Bond film. Sort of felt like an archetype for things. Like, you can see a lot of its, this movie really inspired things like Raiders of the Lost Ark, Indiana Jones.
Oh, really?
I think this movie especially was a big inspiration. This one also doesn't really have an exploitation vibe to it.
Well, that helps.
You come to Moonraker, and it's The Spy Who Loved Me again. But with a Star Wars undertone. Because Star Wars... This movie came out in 79.
Okay, so we're in the 70s.
Star Wars came out in mid-77.
Uh-oh.
And back in the day, you couldn't just whip out a movie. So a lot of people were making their Star Wars riffs.
Yeah.
Like, there were, like, cheaper TV shows like Battlestar Galactica that kind of came out.
Yeah.
But Moonraker was James Bond's take on Star Wars 2 years later.
So that's skippable.
And then... So those were all directed by Guy Hamilton or Lewis Gilbert, who were kind of campier. But then For Your Eyes Only came up, and they wanted to ground Bond more. And a director called John Glenn would come in for the next 5 films. He did the Timothy Dalton movies as well.
Okay.
So I'm going to kind of clump this, Octopussy, and A View to Kill together.
Okay.
Those are the Roger Moore grounded films. If I had to pick one, I would probably do A View to Kill, because I think that's the best. I think that's the best gateway into the Timothy Dalton era.
Okay.
Which is awesome.
I'll put Timothy Dalton in parentheses there.
Timothy Dalton-esque.
Yeah.
The preview, the precursor. Timothy Dalton's first movie was The Living Daylights. He was the 4th Bond. And he was kind of meant to be the 3rd long-term Bond. Unlike George Lazenby, his run was kind of cut short, more so because a lot of rights issues were happening around this time. This is when, like, Never Say Never Again came out, which we'll talk about later.
No.
But The Living Daylights, The Living Daylights is probably my second favorite Bond.
Oh.
So it's from Russia with Love, The Living Daylights, and then another movie we'll talk about later.
Okay.
But The Living Daylights is really good. Essentially, Timothy Dalton it feels very spy novel-esque.
Okay.
So it strips back a lot of the camp that came from the previous movies, and it takes itself more seriously as like a Soviet era spy thriller. It's still fun like the James Bond movies, but it's kind of like the crossroads between the James Bond movies and like The Hunt from the Red October, where it takes its spy stuff and espionage really seriously.
Oh, that shit's cool. I like that.
Then he did License to Kill, which is another good one. It is a step down from The Living Daylights. I would say watch both of the Timothy Dalton movies, because personally, I wish his run was longer, because I'd probably put him as my favorite Bond.
Okay.
If it was longer. But being that it was 2 films, like Roger Moore, you see a real progression in him. Sean Connery, you see a progression. You're able to really sit with the characters. But especially in a series like this, where most of the actors or where Pierce Brosnan, Roger Moore, and Sean Connery each had like more than a trilogy of movies, you can see a real progression in a lot of these people, and Daniel Craig.
Yeah, for sure.
You can see a progression in these people, where Timothy Dalton and George Lazenby had some of my favorite movies that were cut illfully short, either due to the actors' arrogance or unfortunate studio BS.
I see. So
License to Kill.
License to Kill.
So Living Daylights and License to Kill.
Go on the list.
I recommend both of them.
Sure.
License to Kill is also an early role for Benicio del Toro.
I'm not familiar.
He's like the main character in Sicario. If you've seen that movie,
I'm just not the movie buff that you are, apparently.
he's just a good actor.
Okay,
man.
sure.
He's just a good actor.
All right, I'm learning.
Next is I'll be honest, and a lot of people are gonna hate me for this. I don't love the Pierce Brosnan era. Okay. Pierce Brosnan's an amazing Bond. Like, he looks like Bond. He feels like Bond. He's like was born to play the role. I don't love any of the movies he's in.
Was they just written poorly? Like, he plays Bond decently well, but the movies just aren't
yeah.
great?
So he's like a perfect Bond. But okay, so here's what happened. In '89, License to Kill comes out, and then there's a 6-year hiatus to GoldenEye, and that wasn't really intentional. It was legal shit, which is why Timothy Dalton ducked out and Pierce Brosnan got the role. Okay. Because Pierce Brosnan was going to get the role over Timothy Dalton in '87, but he was on a TV show and due to contracts couldn't do it. Oh. So Pierce Brosnan gets the role later in '95, and I love Timothy Dalton to the point where I wouldn't have changed anything if I could, but I would also be super interested to see The Living Daylights and License to Kill
with Brosnan.
So Brosnan kind of got the campy '90s movies, akin to the Roger Moore ones, sort of. The first one I would recommend just because I want to recommend one from each Bond at least. So I'd recommend GoldenEye. Sure. Also, obviously made into the hit Nintendo game.
That I'm familiar with.
And there's a great cast in all of them. They're just really campy movies. And they don't really land for me in the camp because they both want to be camp and slightly edgy. And it's like, pick a lane, bro.
Yeah, those don't really...
Do you want to be like a super campy Roger Moore?
Yeah.
Or do you want to have those edgy, like, spy thriller moments like Dalton? Because you can be in one lane, you can be in either lane and make a really good movie.
But you have to commit.
But when you combine, and sometimes it's campy, and the next moment it's heart-pounding action, like... Where are we landing?
Because you have to kind of take yourself a little too seriously to hit that edgy mark, whereas campiness has to not be too serious to really work.
So next I'm going to clump them together. Tomorrow Never Dies and The World Are Not Enough. I've been able to give you a pretty good breakdown of each movie so far. These movies are interchangeable to me. No one cares.
Pretty forgettable.
Bland. Die Another Day is hilariously bad. So it might be worth a watch.
Okay, all right.
It killed the James Bond franchise to the point where 4 years later, they had to reboot into the Daniel Craig more edgy franchise. So, Die Another Day.
I'm putting bad, but worth watching.
Put parentheses. Maybe watch it at the end as like a what the actual fuck.
Maybe watch it.
Or an interesting like precursor.
I might put it between because I've watched pretty much all the Craig ones now, and after I watch these other ones, I'll watch this before I rewatch the Craig ones.
Die Another Day. I'd almost recommend Die Another Day. Unless you're rewatching because the Craig movies, especially the first two, are really like post 9/11, like post Jason Bourne, spy movies. Where Die Another Day is like we're a little too late. 9/11 happened just a little too late in the year, you know. a little too.
Unfortunately, we already committed to this.
Our spy thriller is already written and filmed.
So is it like campy but 9/11 just happened,
right.
or like
yes, it is campy and 9/11 just happened.
Perfect. I'm excited.
Which spy thrillers. So it's about a year after 9/11 that this movie comes out, but the issue is I don't know if that was the movie people were trying to see in 2002. No. So you come to the Daniel Craig era, which is Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace, Skyfall, Spectre, and No Time to Die.
I still haven't seen No Time to Die, but I think I've seen
Casino Royale is like a direct response where they said, okay, Roger Moore had a lot of campy stuff, but it kind of works in the 70s. It was just a time where camp worked.
Yeah.
This went back into the Roger Moore camp era and kind of went further. Like James Bond is like surfboarding on a brick of ice over an ice thing.
Casino, I think that
he's waterboarded and tortured by North Korea for months.
Yeah.
And then he stops his heartbeat so that he can trick the person into thinking he's dead.
Yes.
So they open the door, and then he runs out and Die Another Day. That movie's wild.
Oh, this is the most recent one.
No, this is Die Another Day.
This
is the last Pierce Brosnan.
I see.
So then we have Casino Royale, which is like a turnaround from that, and it's also the first official Eon movie based on Ian Fleming's first novel, Casino Royale. Which, as we're gonna go into in a couple minutes here, was sold to other companies.
Because I really enjoy Casino Royale because I watched it after Skyfall, Quantum of Solace, and I went back to watch Casino Royale because I didn't realize that was the first Craig one. That is the first Craig one.
Yes, it is.
That movie is wild. Highly recommend that one.
Casino Royale is my favorite Bond movie. It's the first one I watched because my friend and I went to Blockbuster when it was new and just came out on DVD in the new section. And his mom was like, pick out a movie that's not R. And she didn't even really let this motherfucker watch PG-13 movies. But somehow we convinced her to watch Casino Royale. You got some sex, you got a lot of violence. James Bond's getting his fucking balls smashed.
Yeah.
It's crazy. Gambling.
Lots of twists. It's good.
Intense throughout. It's sad. It's it's crazy. And it's a really good thriller.
For a series that just came off multiple years before. Because it went on hiatus after the last Pierce Brosnan one, right?
Only for 4 years.
Okay,
so it's a pretty quick turnaround.
But it went from camp to very serious. That movie's very serious.
Yeah, well, the producers were like, okay,
this shit's not working.
We pretty much had to put out Die Another Day because it was already so deep into production by the time.
Yeah, and it was like what they were already doing.
And clearly, the escapist approach of James Bond is not what people wanted to see.
No.
I mean, Europe and America were like the primary audiences for James Bond. So you got, and Europe and fucking America were going to fucking war right after Die Another Day came out, or right around the time. So
they're
not into it.
Not laughing.
We weren't into it. We weren't into laughing at Pierce Brosnan surfing on a fucking ice tsunami mood. We were into fucking Mads Mikkelsen torturing Daniel Craig's balls.
Oh, fuck yeah. Fuck yeah.
With a rock. And it's awesome. It's my favorite James Bond movie, Casino Royale. Partially biased by the fact that it's the first Living Daylights on Her Majesty's Secret Service. There's From Russia with Love. Those four are up there too for me. But Casino Royale, probably my favorite. I just grew up with Daniel Craig as James Bond. Right after comes Quantum of Solace, which is a movie that makes no sense. It's way too short, and it absolutely sucks. Unless you're like me, who's such a huge fan of Casino Royale and watched them marathon style. Because what it is it's a 90-minute epilogue and post-mortem for Casino Royale. Yeah. It absolutely does not work without Casino Royale. But with Casino Royale, it's still a little jumbled. It's not the best movie, but it works a lot. Especially if you sit down and treat it as like one long movie, because Casino Royale is a longer movie, and it's like these events happen, and then if you treat Quantum of Solace almost like the jumbled movie aftermath of the love of James Bond's life dying, all this BS happening to him, and then immediately after Mr. White gets away and he finds this bigger conspiracy, it works actually pretty well. And I watched them back to back for my James Bond marathon in 2020.
Maybe so it's just because I was younger and any action movie that had a lot of action caught my attention and I liked it. Because I did not watch Casino Royale. I think Quantum of Solace is the first one I watched, but I still liked it just because it's fucking crazy.
It's a lot of action.
There's a lot of action in it.
And the idea by Mark Forrester, who directed the movie, was that he wanted to make the movie, and this James Bond, the series in general, have a long runtime. I don't know what the average runtime is, but I would say over 2 hours, which is kind of a long time, especially considering this series has been alive since the 60s.
Yeah.
And movies in the 60s were not as long as today.
No.
So the fact that the average runtime for James Bond is probably around 2 hours and 10 minutes makes it kind of amazing that Mark Forrester was like, I want to make this movie like a gunshot. I want it to come in fast. The energies just keeps going. I don't want it to linger. I don't want it to be 2 hours. So it's a very different James Bond. Much more derivative of something like a Bourne movie.
It was around the area where a lot of that shit was
really popular. Well, this was 2008, so
yeah.
I think Bourne was like 2006, the first one, yeah. Bourne Identity.
They just knew that if they put a lot of action in the movie, it was going to sell. So yeah, that's what they did.
And a lot of people don't love it, but again, it's one of those things where if you look at it with Mark Forster's idea of direction and see it as like a crazy like epilogue where James Bond is kind of confused and angry and sad and fucked up, and there's a lot of good references to things like GoldenEye with like, or Goldfinger, I'm sorry. There's a lot of gold in these Bond titles.
Yeah, what the fuck? That's confusing.
Goldfinger, you got the golden woman, and this one you got a woman that's covered with oil, which is black gold. Which he's fighting like a corrupt oil baron. It's great. I love it. I love Quantum of Solace. I don't love it. It's pretty good as like an epilogue of Casino Royale.
Yes.
And then they kind of grind it to a halt with Skyfall.
I saw this one in theaters.
But Skyfall works best for Daniel Craig as an independent Bond film. Like, as a Bond film that works separated from the other Bond films. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're a fan of traditional Bond, Skyfall is going to be your favorite. Mm-hmm. But I kind of like the story arc of Daniel Craig. So Skyfall, super hot take. You guys can hate on me. I don't care. Skyfall is my least favorite of the Craig era.
Okay, yeah. I would put Spectre
because it feels more standard.
Yeah. I remember Skyfall was a great movie to watch in the theaters because they did a lot of work on the soundtrack from what I can remember. There's a lot of The music did really
Oh,
well
yeah.
of setting the scenes.
Skyfall had great music with like that Adele opening. We haven't even really talked about Bond scores. I don't think it's super necessary based on our topics we're going through. But
Yeah.
there's a lot of great Bond scores, and like Skyfall, pretty kick-ass.
Pretty good score, because I think for me that's probably why I enjoyed it. It's just the music really kept me in it, and I wasn't as familiar with the way that the stories were going with his character. It just kind of, it was its own movie as far as I was concerned. So I enjoyed it, but I was not very familiar with the film.
Oh.
And then I've seen Spectre. I didn't love Spectre, but it had a great actor as the villain, right? One of the better actors of
Christoph Waltz.
Yeah,
playing Blofeld.
And he's incredible, but like I did not enjoy that movie very much at all.
Fair enough.
And I had almost so much though. This might be the reason I haven't seen the most recent ones.
Spectre, I think it's kind of like Quantum of Solace. Okay,
it has the camp. I think there's some campiness in there that I was just not ready for.
In a way, I consider Skyfall like it's part of Daniel Craig's James Bond arc, but I almost consider it separate. It's almost more of a sequel to Quantum of Solace than Spectre.
Okay.
It's like, okay, Sam Mendes, we made you...
Or Spectre is more of a sequel to Quantum of Solace than Skyfall is.
Spectre is more of a sequel to... Because you bring back Mr. White in a prominent role.
Because I definitely did...
You figure out that the conspiracy from the first two movies has a lot to do with...
See, that might be why I was so lost. Because I just didn't make any of the connections that they were doing.
Right. Well, unless you're a Bond fan or watch these movies back to back, it's hard to really...
It was just confusing
like,
all over the
when
place.
I watched Spectre for the first time, I didn't like it.
Yeah.
And then watching it coming in with more of a educated eye, I did enjoy it as a sequel. Okay. I don't like it as much as Casino Royale or Quantum of Solace, but I like Christoph Waltz as Blofeld. I thought that was a great choice.
He's just good.
Daniel Craig is still great. I love stuff like the first action scene in Mexico where they're like doing the Day of the Dead thing. It's awesome. And finally, you have No Time to Die, which I don't want to spoil it all, but I think you should definitely just finish off your Daniel Craig series. My recommendation is watch all 5 of the movies. Maybe skip Skyfall if you're like, I've seen Skyfall a couple times.
I might watch Skyfall last.
You don't need to watch Skyfall
in order.
But what I would watch in order is Casino Royale, Quantum of Solace,
and then go right to
Spectre, and No Time to Die.
Okay.
Because that's a 4-movie arc that I think is really strong 4-movie arc. And Spectre is a good movie, but it's not necessary to the arc.
Gotcha.
So that's kind of my my opinion on every Eon film. You can watch my how long is it? It actually finally hit 530 views.
Oh, yeah, you have because you did a video.
I did a 2-hour, 50-minute, and 23-second movie or video where I reviewed every Bond film, plus the unofficial Bond films that are also James Bond, plus OK Connery, which is the weird James Bond spin-off, which I'm not going to talk about here, but you can hear me talk about it in the video.
Yeah, if you want more Bond shit, go check out that video.
Grant, not
just
Grant
a taste.
Maxfield, who shows up in this podcast sometimes, but Grant the Hierophant, who also shows up on our channel all the time.
Oh, living.
He shows up and he does the he does his fucking thing, and he drops knowledge on those Austin Powers movies. It's about a 3-hour video. It took me fucking all of COVID to make, so watch it.
So you also mentioned to me that there are James Bond movies that are like unofficial James Bond movies, and one of which came out the same time as a James Bond movie. I'm guessing you talk about that in your long video, but I'm just like curious.
Yes.
So there's like more Bond movies that aren't official Bond movies or some shit?
Yeah, so, okay, to start off, before Eon ever made Dr. No, there was an American stage performance. Okay, so back in the day, they used to do live renditions of essentially stage plays on TV, and the commercials were to set up the next act, essentially.
Okay.
But they're basically stage plays of stuff. And there was a stage play of James Bond's Casino Royale, which features Peter Lorre, who's a really famous actor. He's kind of a weird-looking actor.
Okay.
He plays a lot of ghoulish roles, but he plays Le Chiffre, who's the main villain, who Mads Mikkelsen plays in the 2006 version.
Okay, this makes sense, because I always thought Casino Royale was like a remake of a Bond movie, but after you just went over all of them, there wasn't one.
There wasn't a Casino Royale. Casino Royale was the first book, and they couldn't do it because of the stage play. I believe it's because of the stage play, or maybe he resold the rights, but the rights were sold before Eon gained the rights to James Bond as a franchise overall, and Eon still owns the rights to this day.
So they probably would have done a Royale movie earlier if they could have.
But they didn't have the rights till 2006.
Wow.
And then they didn't even have the rights till Blofeld until Spectre came out, which is why they created the Mr. White character, who's integral to Daniel Craig's plot. So this is kind of a stage play. It's just an hour thing. It's about an American CIA agent called Jimmy Bond.
Really? Oh, Jimmy is not the word to go, oh, come on.
It's the 50s, bro.
I guess. Yeah, maybe Jimmy you can take more seriously then, but Jimmy for me is just a funny name.
They call him James occasionally, but most of the time they're like, hey, Jimmy.
They could have just called him Jim Bonds, and that would have been even easier to take seriously.
Yeah. It's actually not a bad little hour vignette.
Okay.
I'm not going to really recommend it for your little, like, as a detour.
Mm-hmm. I might try to watch it, but by the sounds of it, I might not be able to.
It is a very 1950s stage play.
Yeah, which means hard to watch.
But Peter Lorre puts in a really good performance as Le Chiffre, because I love Peter Lorre. He's in so much good shit. I'm a fan of Peter Lorre, and he does so much stuff that it's not terrible.
Okay.
But at the same time, the definitive adaptation is definitely the 2006 one.
Which came just in time for them when they really needed to make a comeback, apparently.
Right. Speaking of Casino Royale, that wouldn't be the last Casino Royale movie. There's a really weird movie from 1967 called Casino Royale, which features all sorts of people.
Okay. So
like,
there's 3 Royale movies.
Yes.
But one is like not a movie; it's like a stage thing. That's
and the second one is directed by 5 people, and has a huge cast. It's sort of a comedy. It's definitely a comedy. It's a weird movie. It's from 1967. They're like, we need to do James Bond, and originally they thought about doing a straight-edge Casino Royale.
Right.
But instead they decided to do a parody and basically shit on James Bond. And if you watch the trailer, there's like 8 characters that all play James Bond. Because everybody says, I'm James Bond now for some reason. So you got like Peter Sellers as James Bond. Woody Allen, who is known for marrying his stepdaughter and making movies to this day. There's many weird James. It's a lot of people who are all James Bonds, and they're like, I'm also James Bond. Let's do Casino Royale.
Oh my god!
And it's weird, and it ends with a weird like super battle in a casino where there's cowboys and fireworks and sci-fi, and Woody Allen is getting tied up to BDSM things.
What the fuck?
Everybody's doing. They're training, and they say, "Who are you?" And he says, "I'm also James Bond."
Oh my god!
It makes no sense.
Yeah, sounds like it.
It's weird.
I want to watch it.
I recommend it. It's not great, but I recommend it.
You put it on the list. 67.
David Levine's kind of the main. So yeah, Casino Royale 1967. You got to elaborate when pirating the movie, because there's a lot of different versions.
Am I gonna be able to? Oh, I guess that might be the only way to.
I own it.
Of course you.
I'll give you my Vudu.
Of course you.
I own it on Vudu. I'll give you my Vudu account credentials.
Oh, they're not like Netflix.
I own every James Bond movie on Vudu. Well, if you have my username and password, you can't make like multiple profiles.
Okay.
But I can have like 40 people. I can have up to like 40 devices logged onto my Vudu account. So if you get kicked one day and you want to use my Vudu, just ask.
Because there's 40 people on there.
But
already.
I do have a lot of people that have my Vudu because I have like 700 movies, most of which aren't on streaming services.
Yeah, I can understand.
Or just on streaming services. Because if you buy a movie, you usually get a digital code, and if I don't have the movie and it's hard to find physically, I'll just buy it digitally.
Right.
So I have a lot of fucking movies on there.
I think if somebody was your quote-unquote friend and just wanted to take advantage of you, that's the first thing they would want to get is a code.
If someone wants to pretend to be my friend, if someone wants to have sex with me,
right,
just to get my Vudu, which maybe has happened before.
You could try. You should advertise it. Yeah. Hey,
I'll be like,
hey, baby, come sleep with me. You get my Vudu code.
Have sex with me for the Vudu code. I've had sex with girls who still have my Vudu code. So
yeah, well, they got everything they needed out of that situation.
Yeah, you know, I'm left in the dust, and they have 700. They have access to over 700 movies. Who's the sucker now? Who feels violated and betrayed now?
Oh, how'd you feel about Netflix doing their crackdown on people using each other's codes and shit?
Who cares?
Who gives a shit? Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at.
Vudu does. I don't. The only streaming service I don't think I pay for any anymore.
Yeah, well, I
don't. I know that.
Netflix just should have done this back when everyone had it, instead of after there's better options.
The only streaming service I have is I have my mom's HBO Max.
Yeah.
I leech out for HBO Max, but if I got like boxed out of HBO Max because the password sharing policy, and I wouldn't pay for it.
No,
my brother might because he uses HBO Max.
Back when Netflix was like the only one doing it, and everyone had it, that's when they should have done that. But now it's like they're trying to push their originals that nobody wants to watch, and everyone who had it was kind of thinking about not paying for it anyway. So then they do this, and they're like, I'll just not have Netflix instead. So they picked a pretty bad time to crack down on this shit. I understand them wanting to crack down on it.
I understand the crackdown.
Yeah, because they probably were making shit because 40 people use one fucking thing, you know, and
they spend billions on content each year.
Yeah, like yeah, when they're doing that much work on originals and stuff, yeah, you probably should be making money off of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, we'll go to the final Bond film, and then
sure.
And then let's wrap this up. We can start a second episode if you want.
Sure.
Because we got to milk the content, bro.
Yeah. I figured this Bond shit might get a...
I can go on.
Yeah.
I could go on. This is my brief overview.
Overview.
Finally, we have Never Say Never Again, which is directed by Irving Kershner, who isn't known for much except a little film called The Empire Strikes Back.
Just a small film, just maybe my favorite.
He's done like a lot of giallos and stuff. But Sean Connery returns. He said he's never going to do it again after You Only Live Twice. He said he'll never do it again after Diamonds Are Forever. He said he'd never do it after Never Say Never Again, and now he's dead, so he really didn't. But Never Say Never Again's a weird Thunderball remake, and most people don't like it. I don't know why, but I like it, man.
Oh, so you'd recommend... Is this, like, unofficial Bond?
This is unofficial. This is the most official feeling unofficial Bond. It is post. It doesn't have the music. It doesn't have a lot of things. But if you just count Thunderball, which he was also directly involved in, it's actually a good movie. I kind of like it better than Thunderball. It's a better version of Thunderball. It's the 80s. It has a better momentum than Thunderball did in whatever 67 or 65. Is that the movie
came out at the same time as? Or?
No, so Thunderball was written by a guy who was kind of a con artist with Ian Fleming. And then he sued, and somehow the court of Britain was like, well, you have the rights to half of Thunderball. So if you want to sell... So we'll let you license out Thunderball to another studio just kind of to see what happens.
Okay.
And then Thunderball got remade, and they got Sean Connery back. Because at the time when it came out, the only other Bonds were George Lazenby and Roger Moore. And Roger Moore was late into his run. I think it was Octopussy this was going against, and they came out really close together. I thought it was the same day, which was the original plan, but I read into it, it wasn't, but it's within like a month.
Okay.
So these Bonds were kind of battling at the box office, so to speak. Octopussy 1.
Okay, wow.
But Never Say Never Again was like kind of the answer to that. I believe it was by Orion, who did like RoboCop and shit. It was that studio.
That was the one that had the license to the Royale at the time. Was that what you were saying earlier? Or
no.
Oh, okay.
Casino Royale was owned by Fox, I think.
Oh, wow. And they just didn't do shit
James
with
Bond
it?
proper was owned by MGM United Artists.
Uh-huh.
Casino Royale, I believe, was owned by Fox.
What the fuck?
And then WB got the rights to Thunderball.
What the fuck? So who made the Bond? Because you said there's a Casino Royale book. Were they a book series originally?
Yeah, so James Bond starts as a book series by Ian Fleming, who was actually a spy in World War II.
What the fuck?
But it wasn't as badass as in the movies.
Book. Well, that's probably why he wrote
and
the
his
book.
cousin happened to be Christopher Lee, so this guy just has quite the fucking life.
Oh, wow.
Who, you know, as we've established, Christopher Lee was in fucking...
Christopher Lee is a legend. If you don't know Christopher Lee, what the fuck is wrong with you?
Christopher Lee's a fucking legend. Holy shit, we drank a lot of gin.
Yeah.
Oh no, I thought it was to the bottom here.
No,
I'm just drunk.
We've done.
I thought it was here. It's actually up here. So
Yeah.
we're good. We're good, fellas.
Yeah, we're good. Don't worry, we're not too drunk. That's
so-
next episode.
So it was a book series, and then the book series Casino Royale was sold as a book to one studio, and due to rights reasons, kept getting kind of passed around.
So it didn't have a normal release, or as a book, or was it sold as a book?
No,
in like the
it was
50s
sold as
or-
like a book in like the early 50s, and then
Okay.
the movies came out in like the early... The first movie comes out like the mid-60s.
in the mid '60s. Okay, interesting. Yeah, because I could see it being just like a modern. I guess I don't know if this works, but a modern Sherlock Holmes kind of concept. You know what I mean? But because it's a
Right.
spy, you know.
Well, it kind of is, but Sherlock Holmes has since become public domain. Like, when Bond finally becomes public domain in 50 years, we'll probably see a lot of iterations of James Bond.
Yeah, no, it's just if people want more generic spy movies, that's when it's gonna happen.
Speaking of, there's a cartoon called James Bond Jr.
Really?
Yeah, I watched a couple episodes back when YouTube was the Wild West, and I was like 10.
Mm-hmm.
And I was really into these movies because my grandfather had a box set, which he's actually since gifted me, and I have it on my shelf to this day.
Of the James Bond Jr. show?
No.
Oh.
My grandfather wasn't into the James Bond Jr. show from the 80s.
That's too bad.
I mean, of James Bond movies. And I ran out of James Bond movies. And they didn't have the movies on YouTube, but they had the James Bond Jr. TV series in its entirety.
and you're like, good enough.
But it was multi-parts, and I was like 10, so I was like, okay, you know, this
is what I
fucking
got.
cartoon. Oh my god, Jaws is actually a shark person in this instead of a henchman with a grill, like fucking ludicrous.
What the fuck? Did you know I took a class when I was in college that was supposed to be about horror books, which is already a weird concept for a class. But I talk about this now because the lady who did the class was obsessed with Sherlock Holmes for some reason. So even though it was a class about
She
reading
wrote spicy fan fiction.
Yeah, it was-
Horrific spicy fan.
it was supposed to be about
Sherlock Holmes busts Jack the Ripper as he cuts open prostitutes. But he
basically.
also fucks me.
Well, because her whole
Spicy
connection
fan fictions.
was that the Hound of the Baskervilles could somewhat be considered like a little bit horror element, so she made us all read it, and she just kept trying to talk about Sherlock Holmes books the whole time.
What college did you go to? U of M?
That was at in Moorhead, or in not in Moorhead, in Duluth.
Duluth?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that was a cool class, but it was just weird that she was the one doing that and just obsessed with spy novels. But that's when I read like Dracula. If you haven't read the book, dude, read the book. Dude.
It's different.
It's so
I
good.
read all the original books because I was big into Universal Monsters as a kid.
I figured you might have, because that book.
So I've read I read all the books, but it's been a decade.
Mm-hmm. It's so much different than you would expect. Dracula's a great book. Sherlock Holmes movies are great, and that's where I learned about H.P. Lovecraft. H.P.
Right.
Lovecraft is wild. If you guys want to get
Crazy.
back into reading some H.P. Lovecraft, because it's mostly short stories, and he does a good job of not fully describing the creatures, just enough for your imagination to go wild, and then your
Exactly.
imagination will take it to the worst place. So that's why they're terrifying. And yeah, highly recommend that. But I thought about it because she kept trying to make Sherlock Holmes the point of the fucking class, even though it was about horror movies, and it was just a really bizarre. I don't know why the fuck that was a class to begin with. Why the fuck was I able to get credit towards my fucking degree reading horror books? Like,
college is bullshit, man.
It is. I went for music composition to learn how to write music, and I spent like 10 hours a day playing the trombone, and it was like, this is not really why I came here. Granted, the professors, my trombone professor was great. It was just like, that's not why I'm here. Teach me how to fucking write music, please. Yeah.
You got really good at the trombone, though.
I did. I could rip with the trombone. Hell yeah, dude. Don't ask me to play it now, but I mean, at one point in time, I was pretty good at it.
For sure. All right, well, that was... what else do you have to say before we end episode 8 of the Lake and Connor Power Hour?
I'll be back.
Congratulations on 8 episodes, too, Lake.
Yeah, oh, good job, Connor. Go here, let me shake your hand. Oh, yeah, good job, Connor.
I always put the guests first, because originally it was the Joe and Connor's Power Hour when it was a joint podcast, and then...
You goofed.
I goofed on it.
Yeah.
But then I was like, well, you know what? I'll just keep being second build on my own podcast.
So now it's the Lake and Connor podcast?
Yeah,
just because
the Grant and Connor podcast, the Hierophant and Connor Power Hour, Colin and Connor Power Hour. Yeah. It's gone through many names, and it'll continue to, hopefully, But Lake's going to be on another episode very soon. Insert episode.
Yeah.
I can't insert the episode yet because I don't know, but when I have a gap week, Lake's gonna be on another episode or two, depending how much depending how much we could squeeze out of this,
We got plenty of gin left, so I think we got a couple.
Lake is the lemon, and I'm the lemon squeezer.
I'm the fucking backup quarterback sitting on the bench making millions of dollars, and then as soon as you need me for 15 minutes, I come in and do my thing.
Yes, except for making millions of dollars. Nobody makes money off of this podcast.
But I can just pretend. It's big time. I made it big time, you guys. Look at me. Dad, I did it. Look, I did it on Connor's podcast. Oh, my God.
Oh. Daddy. Oh, Daddy,
I made it. Oh. Finally!
This might be the longest episode of the Power Hour.
Really? You gotta do longer episodes. We'll beat it next time.
It's called the Power Hour. I try to keep it to around an hour, bro.
Oh, well then what the fuck? Why are we still recording?
I don't know. Wait, let's see.
You got more James
Bond? No. Episode 1 with me and Joe. God rest his soul. He's an hour and 24 minutes.
Super villain Joe strikes again.
Strikes again.
Joe rolls up in his van. Alright, I'm sorry. I almost said love you, Joe.
Joe's occasionally in the comments.
Is it the Joe that I knew?
No.
It's a different Joe.
100% you did not know this.
Stop meeting people, A, who are pedophiles, B, that have the same name. It's confusing, bro.
Well, Joe, he worked for me at the theater, and he wanted to do a podcast with me, and I'm like, as your boss, I cannot do a podcast with you. And then, once I was no longer his boss, I said, I guess we can do the podcast. Joe has things to talk about, because he's an eccentric guy.
He had things he didn't want to talk about.
And then after 4 episodes, things came to light that he might not wanted to talk about, so now it's the Connor's Power Hour.
Connor featuring... Insert name here.
No, Connor. Wait. Blank featuring Connor.
Yes,
That's how the Power Hour
guest,
works.
It's their podcast every time.
The guest first. All right, guys. We'll see you next time for the Connor and Blank Connor's Power Hour volume. I don't know. 9.
Well done. Professional.